Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first vodcast in Domain 2, which is our domain on matter. Here's where we're going to look at all of the stuff that makes up what we are and start talking a little bit more molecular as we move into cell structure and function. So, just coming off of our evolution domain, we started to get a sense of kind of the timeline of the Earth and timeline of living things on Earth. So we know that atoms make us up. So once the Big Bang happens and now we have all these atoms, what the heck are we supposed to do with them? So the atoms that we're talking about, these are the fundamental unit of matter, and obviously very worth considering in biology since there's very specific ones that make up life. And we have some simplistic models of atoms. There's a couple of ways to showcase it. You have your nucleus where the protons and the neutrons hang out, and then you have the energy fields where your electrons are hanging out. This can be shown as a cloud or it can be shown as an orbital. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at this. Now, in terms of the different types of atoms that exist, there are about 120 of them. These, in their pure form, are known as elements. And with biology, since that's what we care about, we're going to look at the most fundamental ones. And these are the four major elements. C, H, O, and N are the main four, okay? Then you have some other ones that play minor roles, sort of. I guess the next two down the road would be phosphorus and would be sulfur. And then you have a few others, as you can see in this table here, talking a little bit about some of the other ones: potassium, calcium, sodium, chlorine, magnesium. These are sort of the minor league players. And then all around in living things, you can say that we have about 30 to 50 trace other elements. And when you don't get the elements the way that you're supposed to, crazy things begin to happen. So you get nutrient deficiencies. Wouldn't want to have a goiter like that one. And that's from when you don't have enough iodine. And so to alleviate that, this is why our salt is ionized, because it's iodinized, because it's a pretty important element when it comes to our thyroid function. So energy in atoms. The idea, as we know, that energy exists, and atoms are a really good way, especially with bonding, for us to store energy. So we have a couple ways. Energy is what holds the electrons towards the nucleus, and when they absorb energy, okay, then they move to a higher energy level. The movement of the energies back to a lower energy level is then going to release energy. And this is the same idea of what we get when we look at radiation. So here's the idea. You get a ball bouncing down a flight of stairs. Okay, that's the idea of energy levels. As it rolls down, we're going to release energy. And you can see here how if we absorb energy, we're moving out, loss of energy, moving closer in. So how do atoms bond? Well, this is through the interaction of the electrons. Because remember, the actual properties of the identity of an atom, that's all due to the proton makeup. So how many protons it has determines what the atom is. Its ability to bond deals with the electrons that are interacting between the atoms. This is our valence shells. So major kinds of atoms, there are two major kinds of bonds that hold atoms together. We've heard of these. You're very familiar. We've got our ionic bonds. This is the type of bond where you're going to get a transfer of electrons and a gaining of electrons in order to connect basically two ions. A positive ion and a negative ion are going to connect, and you're going to get that connection. So you've got your textbook example here, which is salt. I think we all know and love it at this point. But you don't get a lot of combinations that can happen. So in essence, they're pretty dang boring. So in comes covalent. Okay, our covalent bonds, these are warm fuzzy bonds. It's the sharing of electrons that we know about. And the sharing of, again, that sharing, valent, the valence shell. So they're going to share the outer electrons. Their functionality is so cool that they can have infinite combinations as long as they Share. So, and this is the most important molecule when it comes to the molecules of life, and the main molecules of life are all covalently bonded. So here's just a couple of ways, with these elements that you can see some covalently bonded examples. But we know not all bonds are the same. And this is where polarity comes into play. So we have polar covalent bonds. This is when one atom is going to be just a touch greedier than another one and pull some of those valence electrons a little bit closer to it. And this leads to an unequal distribution of the electrons within those bonds, therefore giving that molecule a little bit of a charge. There's going to be an area that's a little bit more electronegative and an area that's a little bit more positive. You can see this here with the water molecule. That oxygen pulls a little bit of those electrons just a little bit closer to it, leaving those hydrogens a little bit more positive. And because of that, you get polar molecules being attracted to other polar molecules. So just like little magnets, right? And a little negative area is going to be going to a little positive area. And this sets the stage for hydrogen bonds. And I think you remember the importance of hydrogen bonds. These are the attractions. It's not a bond. It's not a chemical bond, but it's an attraction between the polar regions of molecules. So in this case, you can see the example of that positive region of the hydrogen being pulled a little bit closer to the negative region on the other molecule. These are so important with helping hold shape of molecules, in particular proteins, in also particular our DNA. Here we go, right? Shape, huge. Structure and function are related. So the way this shape is, gonna deal with how it functions. This is so vastly important with particular proteins, okay, because of enzyme function and so on. So here's a couple ways that we can showcase some of these models. You've got sort of that space filling model. You've got the ball and stick, which is like when we pull out our molecular model kits. And then you have sort of an orbital giving you a sense of dimension when you look at these, and that kind of helps a little bit. And then you have some other areas where you can showcase some shape based on space filling models and, kind of which gives us a sense of the three-dimensionality of these particular molecules that we're looking at. So chemical reactions, they are the result of breaking and forming bonds, which means you're either going to be pulling energy in or you're going to be releasing energy. So just to remind ourselves of the basics of a chemical reaction, the molecules or the elements or the atoms that go into a reaction are known as our reactants, and the outcome, what we get, are known as the products. So it's important to remember our balancing. What goes in has to be what comes out. It's conservation of matter. We don't lose the matter as it goes. It just gets changed into form. So whatever goes in has to come out. So in the case of water, if I'm going to create water, you see it right there. I have to have two, problem is hydrogen and oxygen are diatomic out in the atmosphere, so I get two of those. Combined with the two oxygens, I'm going to get two water molecules as a result. Okay, so remembering mass, energy, charge are conserved within any of these. All right, so let's talk a little bit about different types of compounds. They're very different depending upon what elements make them up. So we have this idea of emergence. This is increasing levels of complexity in a system that really allow us to see these sort of new properties that aren't really ever seen in the energy levels below them. So we call those emergence, okay? Particularly in biology, this shows up a lot, okay? We're going to see this with the way that molecules form a little bit funkiness because of it, okay? So let's just remind ourselves of this idea that, it's not always what, you don't get a combination of the two things that go in. The outcome, the product, usually and often has vastly different properties than the pieces that made it. So here's our salt example. You've got sodium, hugely explosive metal, seriously will burst into flame. It's very reactive. And then you've got your chlorine, very toxic gas at room temperature, but jeepers, combine them together and you've got table salt, which we love, particularly on fair fries. Just saying. And then there's the radioactivity piece. And this piece goes into play when we're talking about atoms that have it particularly very unstable nuclei. They're radioactive. They spontaneously emit very high energy particles until they get stable, because that's the whole point. Atoms like to be what I like to call, in their happy state. So they're very damaging when they're being emitted. So I want you guys to maybe think, why might that be? We can use radioactivity, though, to our advantage. And we often use radiation as a mode for labeling. Okay, so if we want to be able to find out something, we can label them with radioactivity. So here's an example right here where we use a compound that's used to make DNA, and we can label them, and then we can place them in cells, and we can actually track what's going on. The test tubes get placed so these are things that are ways in which we can use, this radioactivity actually to our advantage, and not use it so much as a, as a detriment to living things. So with that, that's going to end our first vodcast in Domain 2. This first sort of section will include this one on bonding. Then we have one dealing with properties of water, and the following one on carbon. So take a peek at all three, and we'll be talking about them in class. So take it easy, guys.